Good morning. This is Just Listen Live, hosted by George Goodman. Today is April 24th, and I think that it has been a pretty good week. A lot of things have been happening in Illinois. Please listen to my live podcast, maybe pass it on to other people. I have taken the minutes down. I am clear and concise, and it's fun from the perspective of getting information out to you guys. And I hope that it will be helpful for you in the future. All right, so let's go ahead and dive in. I want to talk about utilities in Illinois. There are a couple of things that happened over the last several years that I want to bring to your attention. This is concrete evidence that utilities have been expensive prior to 2025. All right, so in Illinois, the utility rates have increased through legislative energy packages and regulatory approvals by the Illinois Commerce Commission. And in 2021, they did it, 2023, 2025, and 2026. All right, what am I talking about? Because this hasn't gotten any airplay from the mainstream media, local, Chicago. I monitor their news too. All right, here's what's happened. Recent legislative actions. 2026, there was the Clean and Reliable Grid Affordability Act, signed into law January 2026, established a new ratepayer change to fund massive battery storage projects. And the people who were against it claim it will lower the cost. Well, I guess that they would be for it, claim it lowers the cost long term. But the Senate Republicans have argued that it functions as a multi-billion-dollar rate increase. So we'll have to see if that is true or not, because currently the rates change in the spring and the summer, as I've told you before. But let's keep going with this. So in 2021, there was the Climate and Equitable Jobs Act. So the law aimed to move Illinois toward 100% clean energy. It included subsidies for nuclear plants and authorized rate hikes that explains were part of a broader historic reform package. That was 2021. And I'll say the most important parts again. So it authorized rate increases and also subsidies for the nuclear power plants, which means that to keep the nuclear power plants in business, people paying their bills are actually paying more instead of using nuclear power to sell and to provide more power availability to people in Illinois. That's significant. 2016, Future Energy Jobs Act. This act significantly shifted energy policy, including funding for renewable energy and nuclear plant subsidies. So they were doing that back in 2016 as well. And we don't know why, because it never made it out to people so that they could evaluate it. All we know is that the price of utilities in the state of Illinois have increased. All right. Utility companies must also petition the ICC, which is the Energy Commission of Illinois, for delivery rate increases, which cover the infrastructure used to deliver power. Remember, I told you that. I told you that your legislature and the governor signed stuff like that. So The ICC approved rate increases of $606 million for ComEd and $308.6 million for Ameren, with those costs spread through 2027. The Citizens Utility Board tracked reconciliation cases where utilities like ComEd sought to recover hundreds of millions in the budget overruns from 2024. So that was in 2025. So I'm here to tell you to sound the alarm. Utilities are expensive because of what the legislature and the governor has done the last 7 years. It has absolutely nothing to do with what's happening nationally. Okay, so let's dive in. What is the legislature up to? Well, as you know, they're still working on the millionaire tax proposal. And it's so I tell you what it is every time in case they've tweaked it and changed the language. So the proposed constitutional amendment to impose a 3% surcharge on income over $1 million. All right. And it's estimated it could generate 3.8 billion. Okay. Well, that's just an estimate because we don't know exactly who they consider the millionaires. All right. Next is the Chicago Bears stadium deal. All right. Lawmakers are actively negotiating a potential deal to keep the Chicago Bears in Illinois. While the team has requested $800 million in public infrastructure funding, some legislative leaders have previously labeled the request as insensitive. So we'll see how that goes. Data center regulation. The House Executive Committee is holding hearings on the environmental impact of data centers. Specifically, Bill 4016 is under review, which would mandate water resource planning and stricter energy codes for these. Healthcare oversight. Bill 3463 that would expand the Attorney General's power to review healthcare mergers, including those involving private equity firms. That one is interesting. I may have to read more about that one. All right, school policy. Measures to implement bell-to-bell ban on cell phones and wireless devices in classrooms are advancing, aimed at reducing student distractions. So that's not that's happening more than in Illinois. I think that eventually that's going to be a federal law. They really want those cell phones out of the classrooms. So I think that one is going to pass. And I don't think cell phone companies are going to push back. It doesn't affect them financially. It just means that during the school day, kids can't be on their cell phones. And I remember when I used to substitute teach, that is a huge distraction, and schools couldn't do anything because there was no state law, federal law against it, because when they tried to do that, it just caused friction with students and etc. So that's a good one. So let me remind folks too that the legislature is pushing these forward. Why? Because the other side, meaning the Republicans in the legislature, don't have the numbers to stop anything that the Democrats, who have a super majority, want to do in the legislature. Someone said that the state favors Chicago. Now, from the perspective of, think about this, Most of a significant number of the legislatures, since Chicago's bigger based on their population, they would have more legislative people in the House than probably some of the smaller counties. So if influence equals favoring Cook County, Chicago, then that would be correct. So people aren't wrong about that. It's just the way that things were delivered. Okay. So, top campaign issues: economic relief and affordability. So, Governor Pritzker is prioritizing the affordability crisis. Bailey, the Republican, is attacking Democratic fiscal policies he claims have made Illinois a bottom five state. And Republican candidates for the U.S. Senate are saying, highlighting higher property taxes and inflation. Okay. So I don't know what Senate candidate can do about high property taxes and inflation. Inflation, maybe through policy at the federal level, I would say. Uh, Top campaign issue number two: mega project stadium bill. A major talking point this week is a bipartisan supported bill in the House aimed at keeping the Chicago Bears in Illinois through property tax incentives. Lawmakers and candidates are debating the balance between corporate incentives and homeowner tax relief. Okay, so yeah. So we have to decide if we want the Chicago Bears to stay. You have to weigh how much revenue the Bears are bringing into the state of Illinois versus using taxpayer dollars to build them a stadium. That's what it comes down to. And in Missouri is always a great example. So currently, the Kansas City Royals, the baseball team, they're keeping them. Why? Because Missouri, in Kansas City, made a mistake of letting the Kansas City Chiefs build a new stadium in Kansas. And they're going to feel the effects of that through the tax revenue. And it's surprising to me at times that Kansas City people in Missouri don't have somebody project out how much money they would make. Normally, that they keep stadiums 15 to 20 years and they provide jobs. So if you're actually going to have more money coming in long term, that's called investment in your team to make more money later. So in Illinois, what I'm getting to is that, yes, they need to, and they probably have, weighed out 600 million versus in 15 years in revenue, they're making 3 or 400 more million based on that investment because um, Indiana, especially, would give any uh, Illinois team a sweet deal to get them to come over to their state because they realize that they want that additional revenue. So that's a little bit of history about that. Okay, so as I keep saying, this is a rematch between Governor Pritzker and candidate Bailey for the governorship. And Stratton is running for the U.S. Senate. She's running against, I can't think of the Republican's name. Sorry. Okay, so here is why I'm talking about the key rematches. Um, People know Darren Bailey, okay, but besides him, The other folks running for office, you had to go and look for their names. And when I'm doing these updates, there is little information, and I'm drawing in information from all of the papers and social media content in Illinois to bring you the information. These other folks on the Republican side are getting no information out to anyone. So Bailey, and on the Republican side, he seems to be the only one that shows up in information when you're trying to get details of what's happening. So, Republican Party, again, I'm not sure what they're doing or why, etc. But if you wait too long, then you can't be surprised in November. And I'll tell you, I know who the Democrat is for Attorney General. Last cycle, he won by quite a lot. He wasn't even it wasn't even a challenge. And so far, the only candidate running any ads is Pritzker, and he's not even doing a lot of them. Why? Because they don't feel challenged. And the last thing that I'm going to talk about is polling. There's there's no polling in Illinois that I could find. Why is that? And we should be asking about that because the Republican Party, if they said that Bailey, for example, was only 5 or 6 points under Pritzker, then maybe people will become more interested because it seems like at this point, and this is my opinion, that the Democrats, statewide office holders, don't seem to be that concerned about who's running against them in their races. And it seems like that the Republican Party is just silent and they're not spending any money. And I've said this a couple of times. I think perhaps as it we get into the summer, we might start seeing some changes. My issue is the elections that I've actually followed, the more attention you get as a candidate, the more likely people believe that you can win. And if you are a newbie trying to get elected, look at New York City. 2 years ago, no one knew that guy's name. I knew his name based on the news talking about him all of the time. In New York City, he started running ads. So I'm just baffled with the candidates in Illinois and the Republican Party. Okay, so this is Just Listen Live, hosted by George Goodman. I'll be back on Monday. Please subscribe. I made the podcast a little earlier, but you can still watch it and make comments. Everybody have a great weekend and take care of each other. Goodbye.